it's a consortium. There are roughly 25 states that are part of the PARC consortium and about 25 states that are part of the Smarter Balance consortium. The idea is this: if we are all using Common Core state standards and we're all basically teaching the same thing, why are all 50 states knocking themselves out to create assessments and to give tests to kids to find out if they're meeting those standards? We're all doing the same standards. Why aren't we giving the same tests? So that was the idea. Let's get the states together and do that. So the next generation assessments will become official in the spring of 2015. They're doing sort of a very rough field test this year, this spring, with schools that are interested. They're doing a full pilot throughout the state next year. And really the big year you need to keep in mind is 2014-15. Because the 2014-15 school year is when all of this stuff becomes official. It's also when some of you graduate. Raise your hand. Yeah, there we go. So it's going to happen that year. All right. Secondly, in our house here, the current Praxis 2 exams will be administered only through July of this year. They'll be replaced in September. You probably got the memo on that. So what's the name of the new exams? Trivia question? Anybody know? Okay, they were really creative. They spent a lot of time coming up with this name. They're called New Educator Assessments. And the New Educator Assessments are designed to replace the Praxis 2. Bottom line, we've been doing the Praxis 2 exams now for quite a few years. They're pretty expensive. They're driven by the cost. You have to pay for them out of your pockets. A lot of the states in the country are giving the Praxis exams, and so what has happened in the last couple of years is a lot of the states have started saying, why are we paying all of our money to ETS? Can we pay it to somebody else that might be able to do this a little bit better and a little bit cheaper? And so that's where those assessments came from. And so here's the three things that I think you need to know. One is that all of these assessments will be taken on a computer, so you won't have a paper and pencil option. Secondly, they will be cheaper than the Praxis exams. And thirdly, and probably most importantly, immediate results. You finish the last question, you click submit, and it tells you right now if you passed. So those tests, what's going to happen is they will take over the Praxis exams. So you probably saw in the email that you got that if you're planning on taking any Praxis 2 exams, you have through July, this July, to take those exams. That's going to be the end of Praxis, and these new assessments will come in place in September. Okay? If you have already passed the Praxis 2 exam, it continues. It isn't like you have to take a second exam. Once you pass Praxis, you're done. But if you don't take Praxis by July of this year, you jump over to the new exams. There are still some decisions to be made in terms of the content of the exams, except that I can tell you that they're supposed to be very much parallel to Praxis. It's not like they're going to completely be a game changer. It's going to be a different company, different format, but otherwise the content and so forth will look very much like Praxis. Noticing my answer? We're guessing so, I think so. Okay, because that's where we are in the college right now. I was in a meeting today, no kidding. I was in an AYA meeting that was about 2 hours long, and I walked out of that meeting more confused than I was when I went in. Okay? And it wasn't because people are just dumb. It's because we don't have all the answers. And a lot of these things are being batted around the state. We know what's going on, rumors, we know what's definitely going to happen. I can tell you for sure these assessments are coming, what they're going to cost, how often they're going to be given, etc. Those details are not worked out yet. Okay. So, yes, if you look at the assessments that we do during methods and during student teaching, a brand new assessment being piloted for assessing during student teaching, and most of you know that is the TPA, right, the EdTPA. So that's the Education and Teacher Performance Assessment. We love the TPA, don't we? Oh yeah. All right, so the TPA is a relatively new animal that's come along. And so I want to talk a little bit about that for a second, again, so that we're all on the same page with this. Those of you who are in student teaching right now are in the middle of doing the TPA. It was done last fall. The TPA is it's still considered to be in the pilot stage. And so last fall was really its first main pilot to be used throughout the state. There are a number of states. I was at a conference last fall in San Diego at a TPA conference, and there are about 22 states that are using the TPA right now as their measurement tool. The idea is the TPA is all about, can we measure during your student teaching to say whether it's reasonable that you can move on, get your first license, and go out in the field. And I think the more comfortable, the more familiar we get with it from freshman year on up, the more it'll just become part of what we do and not that big of a deal. Right now it is a big deal because it's new and it's being piloted, but it will become part of sort of the mainstream of what we do. It becomes fully operational in Ohio, which means students will start paying for it beginning fall of this year. Now, that means that because we do methods in the fall and student teaching in the spring, those of you who are going to be student teaching next spring, a year from now, will be paying for the TPA. It's going to be around $300. And that will be charged to you as a course fee, as opposed to being charged separately. And the reason they're going to do it as a course fee is so that it qualifies for financial aid along the way as well. But it's going to be a required assessment. We don't know yet. There are certain things that we haven't been told. So this next one is a big one. I ran this by Dr. Fordham to make sure I had the slide right, and she said, yeah, you're right on. The passage of the TPA may be required for licensure. It may be required for graduation. It might be required for both, but we don't know yet. That's a very common question we get. What are the stakes with the TPA? Do you have to pass it to graduate? Don't know. It hasn't been decided. The state is still working out the bugs on it. Right now, what they're most concerned about is piloting the assessment to figure out if it's giving accurate results and how our students are doing in the field. So let me go back to that, because I have a slide about that. So let me talk about the PLT for a second, because that's when we do both of those things. The PLT right now is Principles of Learning and Teaching. That is an exam that you take that is both multiple choice and essay short answer. And that PLT is a Praxis 2 exam. So if you are, suppose you're middle childhood math and science, you'll have a middle childhood math praxis, a middle childhood science praxis, and you'll have a middle childhood PLT exam. The PLT most people take in January during their last year. You want to finish methods first before you take it, because a lot of the things you learn in methods are actually tested on the PLT. So that's kind of a senior year thing that you take after you're admitted to method, or after you finish methods. But that test, that PLT, is likely to go away. And the reason why the state is saying that is, if you look at the TPA requires you to assess like where your students are at, and you have to write lesson plans, and you teach, and you videotape part of some of your teaching. Some of you are very familiar with this. And you submit all of that stuff, videotapes of your teaching, lesson plans, assessments. And what they're saying is, if you can do all of that stuff well and successfully, then you don't need to take another test. And so the PLT is probably going to go away in another year or two. But right now, is it definitely going to go away? No, and even if it does, do we know when? We don't. So we definitely want people who are in the method student teaching loop right now to take the PLT. If you're doing methods in the fall, don't take it in the fall. You're going to wait until methods is over anyway. And then by the time methods is over, hopefully we'll have a ruling on this, and we'll know whether you have to actually ever take the TPA at all. The PLT. And the PLT, right now, they're talking about replacing it, again, by Pearson writing a different exam. So it won't continue to be a Praxis exam. If I had to place my bets, I would say the PLT will go away in another year. But I can't say that officially, because I haven't been told that officially. No decision. Fine. Yeah, kind of. But here's a question. Another slide up ahead here. But once you graduate, and you're out in the field, you go into a resident educator program for 4 years. Okay? In the old format, people in the resident educator program, well, it's called resident educator at the time, but we were out on sort of a 2-year temporary teaching license. You had to do an exam called the Praxis 3. Okay? The Praxis 3 looks very familiar because it looks a lot like the TPA. What they're doing is getting away from, they're going to drop the Praxis 3, which people had to pay for. Now, it's going to be replaced also by another assessment. We don't know what that's going to cost and who has to pay the bill. That's still in the works. Okay? I know it's complicated. There's a lot of things here. That's why I wanted to make sure that we get at least a few of these things on the table. But what I can tell you is that once you graduate from college, you will enter into this 4-year resident educator program. And there will be sort of a set of requirements that you do over the course of those 4 years. And one of the requirements is to do another assessment. It's kind of like the NTPA, but you will have to pass that assessment in those first 4 years. We actually do it in year 3. And then once you've gotten through that gate of those 4 introductory years, then you officially get your first 5-year teaching license. So the analogy is just like, the reason they call it a resident is just like in the medical field. Right? If you get a medical degree, you go out and you're a resident in a hospital for a certain number of years, and once you finish your residency, then you're given your official license to practice medicine. Same idea here. You get your degree, you get an initial license, you go out for 4 years. During those 4 years, you're very carefully mentored within your school, and you do another assessment. If that goes well, you get your 5-year license, and you're on your way. way. So what we know is that Praxis 3 has been part of our background, has been part of our program for a long time. That assessment is no longer going to be required. Okay? So those are the changes, those are the big changes in program that I see. What I would say is just keep an ear to the rail here, because a lot of these things are changing quickly. And that list of things I just went through with you, and by the way, we'll make this PowerPoint available at our community at Blackboard so that you have access to it. Those are really common questions I get asked by you guys all the time. That's why I wanted to have it up here one time for all, so you can kind of see what's going on. Things are going to change. There's no doubt about it. Education is all about change, so another year from now they may decide to do this instead of that. As those things happen, that's my job, is to keep you informed of that so we all know what page we're on. You don't pass it, you don't graduate because you didn't pass the course. You know what I mean? So it could be like a course requirement. But the university in the state of Ohio have no requirement at this point for passage of TPA for graduation. So it's a little bit complicated. It's up to individual teachers.
So officially by the state, it's not required.
That's right. Through 4 years, you're really gearing up for it all the way along. A lot to be seen here over the next couple of years. A lot of final decisions haven't been made. A couple things, just announcements, so you know what a couple of things that are coming up. One is you've gotten a couple of emails from this, I know, from our officers. BGCTM is hosting on March 18th, which is Monday at 6 o'clock. Linda Gojak, who is the president of the National Council of Teachers of Math. I can tell you that in my 20-plus years on this campus, we've never had a sitting president of the national math or science organizations on our campus. I would really, really like to see everyone in the room who is in math or math and science middle childhood being at that meeting, unless you've got a class or some other conflict. I think it's going to be a great opportunity to actually have a sitting president right here on our campus to be able to do that. Jared?
I received an email that said it's in the math side building. This one said Oldscamp.
It is, I believe it's in Oldscamp. Is that right? Where's Lauren?
Math Science 210.
Oh, Math Science 210. Okay. So that is a change from what I originally got. Thank you. Math Science 210. Thanks, Amber. Secondly, just so that you know that this is coming, I know some of you have already received this email, but we are using a new tool. Has anybody ever before right now used or heard of Sign Up Genius? Okay. Sign Up Genius is the coolest thing in the world. You need to learn it. Okay? And I'll tell you, I learned about this teaching my 8th grade class because our school's using it. And, you know, Sign Up Genius is as simple as you send an email out to people and you have a pre-planned schedule, and you can just go in and click and sign up and schedule yourself online. What we're using it for at school is things like, even with parent volunteers. We're going to be having a Valentine's party. We've got to have somebody bring napkins, and somebody brings cups, and somebody brings... And you can make a list of all of those things, and a parent can actually go online and just click and put their name on the line so they know what they're supposed to bring. It's all automated and all done online. You're going to see that. Don't dismiss it as spam mail when you get it from Nancy or Wendy or I, because that's our opportunity to be able to do a lot of scheduling online we used to do with pencil and paper. A couple things just in closing here about our common time. One is, as you make plans and you schedule yourself for fall classes, the common time in the fall is going to be also on Tuesday afternoons. We're bumping it forward an hour. It's going to be from 4:30 to 5:50 on Tuesdays. So as you schedule your classes, please stay away from those times. What we did is we went through all of the schedules from last fall to minimize the number of conflicts. We know that no matter when you put it, there's going to be a couple of conflicts. We had 3 or 4 of them tonight. But we minimized the conflicts. We worked with the Student Advisory Board to sort of work through some of those pieces. But 4:30 to 5:50 on Tuesdays, you should block out in your schedule for the fall. And our speaker for the fall semester seminar is Dr. Bill Spear. He's the Dean of the College of Education at the University of Nevada at Las Vegas. He's also a math educator. He was one of the people who wrote the professional teaching standards for teaching math for NCTM. That was a landmark document that came out over 20 years ago. He is still very active in the speaking circuit. He is a wonderful presenter. You're going to love the guy. We're going to bring him in that night to present to us and do some other things, but that is scheduled for Tuesday, October the 15th. Okay. If you have any other questions I can address afterwards, I'll do that. Thank you so much for coming tonight.